Nashville is alive with music, sure, but creativity also thrives in our art, marketing, technology, food, and in every corner of our community. On Creative Assembly's The Spark podcast, our mission is to amplify Nashville's diverse creative voices, foster growth through shared journeys, and inspire a city that thrives on collaboration. Each episode will take a deep dive into the lives and passions of Nashville's most innovative minds. We'll explore their creative processes, the challenges they face, and power of collaboration, along with so much more. Welcome to the Spark Podcast, brought to you by Snapshot, a digital agency on a mission to serve with heart, execute with excellence, and build something bigger together. And now, here's The Spark.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Spark, where Nashville's most innovative storytellers share how creativity and strategy collides. Today we're joined by Traylor Woodall, founder and CEO of Fivestone Studios and partner at Bella. Traylor merges design, technology, and human connection to bring bold, immersive narratives to life. Whether through animation, experiential media, or live action content. Let's explore what it takes to build creative cultures that scale and experiences that transform. Let's spark this conversation with Traylor today. Traylor, welcome to the show today, man. I am so excited about this episode. It's so good to have you on. Just all the things you're doing in creative, and I've just always admired everything you guys have built over at Fivestone and now Bella. So,
well, I'll tell you what, Mark, it's an honor. I love building what we're doing as a community in Nashville. I love that it has started there and now it's growing and expanding. And so I'm really excited to be a part of that story with the community. So
awesome. Well, hey, just as we kind of kick this thing off, maybe take everybody on your journey of like what got you into the creative world in the first place.
Boy, I'll try to keep it short. Obviously, we've got the power of video editing, so we'll hopefully shorten this up. But as a kid, I grew up, I really wanted to create worlds. I actually thought I was going to be a video game designer. That's the funny thing. And because most kids, even I'm old, but back then there were actually video games when I was a kid, and I loved them, and I thought, golly, I want to do this because you could create these worlds that you could immerse yourself in. However, I quickly found out I really sucked at programming. So I was not a good programmer. I was not the technical guy, but I could do art. And so I quickly realized, computer art is my jam. And so kind of fast forward, that began a journey of graphic design and then an internship that was really pivotal, which I think we'll be talking about mentors later. One of my mentors was at that internship. And then fast forward a little farther, I had a whole failure around my first company I started, but it was a great learning experience. But that was all around creating these immersive worlds. But back then it was just animation. Animation was my first step. Was like, okay, maybe I can't make video games, but man, I can do 3D animation, I can do 2D animation. And so that really began my journey. I ended up at Country Music Television as a broadcast designer. And so that was where my degree in graphic design kind of married with motion design. And I was able to work on these amazing projects, which brings up my number 2 mentor story. I had an amazing mentor, several mentors at Country Music Television that taught me the power of culture. Also, they just kind of breathed life on my gift and what I was doing in the craft. And so I learned a lot there. Out of that, then I went and started Fivestone. And so Fivestone began 2007. I guess we're coming up, it's over 18 years ago. And really the passion at that point was I started Fivestone out of a place. My desire was I wanted to control culture better. I learned through all my experiences the power of culture. If you have great leadership that enforces and makes a space for artists to really grow, then there's this incredible 1 + 1 = 3. I have you'll see on all my social media, I talk about bad math. I'm always looking for 1 + 1 = 3. And I had some really great mentors that taught me about that. And I wanted Fivestone to be a place for that to happen. So the other thing was I left because I wanted to be the cool shop that got hired. I was kind of part of the in-house team at Country Music Television, which was great. I learned a lot. But then I was like, all the cool work is actually being hired out to New York or LA. And I said, I kind of want to be the cool shop. Is that possible? And so that was really the quest for Fivestone, was like, could we be the cool shop in Nashville, because one of the big decisions I'll rabbit trail is, a lot of people, gave me advice: do not do it in Nashville. It's not big enough. It's not in the right place. You're not in Chicago. You're not in the major markets. You can't compete. And the truth was, it made it a really long sludge, a long haul, I'll say.
Yeah.
But we persisted. Now Nashville has shifted. It's become the go-to city. Now when I travel to the big cities, everyone wants to come work for us in Nashville. So it's a fun flip. And now we are a cool shop that is doing the cool work, and we are getting to work on the bigger brand projects and things. And so, but it's been a long, painful journey. So that's partly what we'll be unpacking today, I'm sure.
Yeah, totally. Most people from the outside, we've known each other since the beginning of our company. And, I'll talk a little bit about some things you helped us out with in the early days. And, most people from the outside look and say, man, I've just seen Traylor and Fivestone like on a meteoric rise, and they don't know that, hey, you started a business and it failed at first. And it was a great learning lesson that put you actually on the right journey that you were on. And so maybe what was like, talk a little bit about like that failure and what you learned from it and how you like implemented new change.
Absolutely. Well, I'll back it up. So when I was one of those people that there's a saying, you're not all that in a bag of chips. I thought I was all that in a bag of chips. I had a deep need for a big meal of humble pie, because coming out of college, I thought I was pretty amazing. And I told my dad, hey, Dad, I'm starting a company right out of college. I'm 21. I didn't know what I was doing. And my dad said, hey, love that idea. Great thought. He said, can we put a little comma in that? Why don't you, because at the time I was in Gainesville, Florida, going to the University of Florida. I graduated. He said, why don't you go 2 hours south, go to work for Disney. Go learn on their dime for 5 years. And me being the wise 21-year-old that I was, I said, no, I got this. Being someone that didn't even know how to balance his checkbook, I went and started a company, and of course it epically failed. And so it was beautiful because some of the key things I learned out of that was, one, I was not all that in a bag of chips by myself, because it was all about me. There's funny, I'll share this, but there's a video I first created where every credit on the list, at the end of the credits was me. me, and me, and me. And I can't say how much that has flipped now, where, you don't see me anywhere. It's about finding people better than me and a lot of that. But I needed to go through that journey. And so that company failed. It took me on a journey, though, out of that, where I learned that I will always be second best by myself. But we will be more than world class when I surround myself with the right people, with the right counsel, with the right advisors, with people that are infinitely better than me. And so that began a painful journey that I had to go on. And then along the way, I learned some other levers, like creating culture. Culture is a huge driver for creativity. And so I learned a lot of these pieces along the way. Another crazy thing I learned along the way, I had a 10-year, what I call the dungeon experience, where, my company ended and I just pretty much just tried to find my way out of a paper bag for about 10 years. And along the way, though, I took on sales jobs and I realized, oh my God, I can sell. I can persuade. However, I learned I have to believe in it. And so I learned very quickly that I was a creative that could also sell and pitch. And so that became very important later, because there's a lot of creatives that want to do X, but you aren't going to, some people get found, but the best creative is someone that can sell their creative. And so I quickly learned that it's not dirty to sell. It is, it's the power of persuading, being passionate, excited, believing what you're doing, and then people catch it and then jump in. So that's been the journey. So that failure triggered a lot of growth that I had to go through as a learning about leadership. God, there's probably countless more, but that's at least one good story of failure turning to success.
Traylor, that probably right there is one of the most powerful lessons that we've shared on the show up to this point. And I would just say that, hiring people smarter than you, it's hard sometimes for super creative people like you to go, man, I need somebody even better than me, or I need somebody better than me at something else in the company in order to make this thing a success. So, I mean, thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
I've got one more little tidbit I was just thinking about. There is a saying I have now called "be the rung." And so, and I learned this, and it was early on. So the first person I hired, not the first, probably the second, but was a guy named Kyle Jones. I hope Kyle Jones sees this, but he's now at Pixar, and he's an art director at Pixar. But this is one of those valuable lessons. I was so terrified when I first hired him because he was so much better than me. And up till that time, I was the animator. I would animate, I'd create the stuff, and then I was like, why would Kyle ever want to come work for me? You know, I literally went to New York to try and recruit him. You know what I mean? And so anyways, he ended up coming on board. And what I learned was he wanted to just do great work. And he wanted a safe place to do great work. And just to kind of that sandbox to play in. And I could make that sandbox. And so I call it, it's called making a space for creative artists to become warriors, to take on their giants, to do their great work. And so that was what I realized, but that was a really tough spot because in a lot of creative studios, there's always an ego at the top that can't be bested. You know, they have to, everyone has to kind of fit under that thing. And I have two partners, Brian and David. We flip the model. We're on the bottom. We serve up. And everyone better be better than us or we have a problem. You know what I mean? And their ability to stay is our ability to serve them. And so now we've had artists, and now back to the be the rung. Be the rung is, everyone needs to climb the ladder. I'm like, here's my head, use me. If I can't offer you what you need, you should be leaving, and I will serve you to get there. So now we've had artists that have gone on to Netflix. We've had them go on to Pixar, but guess what? We bless them. We send them off. I'm so excited for them because guess what? They're saying great things about us as they move on. That opens up doors down the road. I'm a huge believer that it comes back. And so it's a place of having a generous heart and a place of saying, hey, you know what? And also knowing Fivestone is not the end all be all. We are a starting spot. And there's some people who have been with us since their entire journey. Some people are with us for a season. And whichever that is, my goal is let me be the rung, let me serve you, help you get to where if we're not meeting your need, let me get you there. And it doesn't have to be inclusive within us. So,
wow, you were, if you haven't written a book already, you're going to be writing a book. But this is amazing. So, we talked about it like mentors, and I know there's been countless people that's left your shop that has went on to do great things that sing your praises, your team's praises of getting them to the next level. So you've mentored a ton of people. I guess, going back to those mentors, who were they and how'd they impact your journey?
Wow. I have two. The first one was a guy named DJ Head, and to this day, whenever I go back to Florida, I try to meet with him. But he was DJ was a visionary, and he still is. He has a video production company in Gainesville. So while I was a just snotty-nosed little college graphic design kid, I got this opportunity to intern at his video production company in Gainesville. At the time, this is the early 90s, shows how old I am, but he had invested in, back then to do animation, it was a $250,000, $500,000 investment. There was no After Effects, it wasn't Adobe Suite, the $50 a month. It was like really expensive. And so he invited me in, he let me intern, and then eventually he gave me the keys to the studio and said, anytime, anything you've got going on. And I began to freelance for him. I began to doing things, but more than that, he taught me stuff. He kicked my butt. He was, I love DJ, but he did not mince his words. You know what I mean? And so I very quickly began to learn that there's creative and there's business. And you need to make sure the two are aligned. You know what I mean? Because there's all kinds of cool shops that make beautiful work that does not accomplish anything. And I learned DJ was one of the first people that said, hey man, what are you doing? And one, are you even hitting the budget? And are you doing what the client asks? And so DJ was a really great mentor to me. And he showed me what it meant to give me a space. Literally, he gave me his space and let me come in and work. I mean, a couple of funny stories. I learned there how to set an alarm. and to turn off an alarm, because he had an alarm on the studio. And there were multiple nights where the police came because I screwed up the alarm. And DJ had to, teach me again how to make sure the alarm didn't go off, as I came in the studio. So DJ, I can give him a shout out. DJ had amazing mentor. Fast forward ahead, when I was at Country Music Television, I had several, but one of the greatest was a man named James Hitchcock. And this is an executive. He was like the EVP of creative and marketing. And what he taught me was, and this is what we've really brought into Fivestone, it's really the foundation of us, is what I call culture of honor. And there's what we practice is, and he taught me this, there's a tension between what I just call a military pursuit of excellence. Like, there's people that just kind of want to casually make cool stuff. We don't do that. I mean, we are aggressive, but we're not about perfection. We want greatness. We're hungry. We quickly can weed out but then on the other side, and this is what most shops miss, is a deep love for people. And so if you don't have that, boing, the rubber band snaps back over here and you've got a sweatshop. Mm-hmm. So the only thing that keeps us from being a sweatshop is we actually deeply care about our people. We're accountable to caring for our people. And so he taught me that. And so a classic little story with James was one time I got called into his office and I was, oh God, I got in trouble or whatever. And so and at the time I was a senior broadcast designer. I'm working on these huge television shows, doing all this work. And he said, hey man, he sat me down. He said, I noticed you've got a sleeping bag under your desk. And I was like, yeah, I do. He said, what's are you working late hours? Yeah, I'm doing all-nighters. I'm trying to hit this deadline. You know what I mean? And so we began to unpack that. And one of the biggest life lessons he taught me, it was not like slapping me on the wrist, but what was great was he began to unpack the why. Part of it was artists like myself, I call it polishing brass on a sinking ship. They want to just make something perfect. They've gone way past an A, and now they're working on A+. And you know what I mean? So I got some lessons about that. But then also what was uncovered was there was probably some project management, some client management, some things that they needed to do as a department to protect me so that I was not being tasked to do stuff that I couldn't do. So what was really great about it, he was accountable, he did coaching with me, but he taught and began to teach me, this is how you take care of artists. And guess what? I would lay my life on the line for James because I felt protected. And then here's how the meeting ended. He pulled out a big bottle of champagne. And he said, Traylor, I want you to go home. He said, you need to refill your life account. That's where I didn't even know there was a life account. And he said, I want you to go spend time with your family, and I want you to take 3 days off. Take a long weekend, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, and it's paid. And I want you to go refill that life account because it's critical to me that your wife doesn't hate me.
That's awesome.
So lesson one, James Hitchcock taught me that. And so then, the last piece was, though, there's an art style called chiaroscuro, okay? And that's using light and shadow. Without, like, even you and I right now, this lighting is creating shadow so that you can see who we are. You have to have bad to see good. So then James and that team leaves, new leadership comes in, completely toxic. And I all of a sudden got chiaroscuro. I got the full picture. I could now see, oh my God, this was great culture, and oh my God, this is toxic. And I watched productivity that was through the roof because everyone felt aligned, protected, they had a safe place, and they were giving everything they had to protecting themselves, avoiding, all this stuff, because now all of a sudden toxic, yucky leadership came in that didn't care about us. And so that to me was the perfect thing. I left with that lesson and started Fivestone.
That's awesome.
So that's another little culture of honor.
What a great story. Yeah, thank you. I wanted to invite you to our next Creative Assembly gathering. It's our relaxed, bi-monthly networking event in East Nashville, where ideas spark over drinks and creative collaborations come to life. We meet at 1530 Riverside Drive with light snacks, refreshments, and plenty of free parking. Whether you're an agency owner, part of a creative team, a freelancer, student, or even a business owner curious about collaboration, you're always welcome at Creative Assembly. RSVPs aren't required, but they help us plan for space and treats. Just search Creative Assembly Nashville on Eventbrite or visit creativeassembly.agency /events for details and the RSVP link. Come ready for connections, conversations, and creative collaboration. We can't wait to see you there. Well, speaking of storytelling, like I know you took some time and you learned your sales journey too. And I think the key to being a good salesperson is storytelling. And so and I know you're a master of that. Like, do you feel like it's gotten easier or harder for you throughout the years?
I think it gets easier because I am constantly working on that craft. And so I will say we call it on the box. I'm not on the box doing the storytelling, but now it's more mentoring. It's now being part of teams, looking at storytelling, coaching storytellers. I'm more coaching storytellers than doing the storytelling myself. But the passion is there. I love it. That's why we connect well with customers and partners, is because we're authentic storytellers, and it starts with me, and then it spreads down to our team. And so I think it is creating a culture of that authentic storytelling that I think is critical to us doing what we do, for sure.
Yeah. Well, Fivestone, started as an animation shop. You evolved into like a full-on immersive experience shop. I've seen a lot of transitions that you've made over the years, and now even up to doing live action with Bella as a partner. Like, what's driven that evolution?
I think how people digest media is changing. And part of that is evolving with that. My original goal when I started Fivestone was I just want to be a vendor to country music television and do broadcast design. I thought, cool, if I could just work. And then all my old bosses went on to Oxygen Network and, Nat Geo. And man, that'd be my favorite thing in the world. Well, guess what? The whole TV network world began to kind of fall apart. You know what I mean? And as cable things shifted to streaming, shifting to this and that. And so we quickly it's just a constant thing of what are we good at? We're good at beautiful design, beautiful storytelling, high-end production of whatever it is. And we just have kept that lane, but what we do it in constantly changes. And so I think as Fivestone evolved, animation started to become commoditized. Anyone and their cousin could kind of do it. You know what I mean? And then the standards also changed where many clients just needed to check the box. And so, hey, we just need to, and we quickly realized we weren't the check the box company. And so one of the lanes that opened up for us, and this was probably in 2014 or so, was we had one of our big clients that we were doing all the standard storytelling, videos, animation, all of that work. They came to us and said, we've got a problem. We are actually being tasked by the CEO to launch a digital tour within our headquarters. He wants to transform this place so that we can really recruit and retain employees well. So we need to do digital storytelling in space in our headquarters. And we have 8 weeks or whatever. We're starting this thing to happen. It began a 2-year journey with us where we all of a sudden shifted. And it was like it was the right opportunity, we needed things to change too, because we were struggling because the bottom third of our business was going away because there's all these low cost check the box. There's, like if you watched in the state of Tennessee, if you do a study, there were originally, 3 animation companies. Then there were 500 animation companies. And so what we quickly began to see is that in terms of immersive and experiential, there were much fewer of those. And then we had this opportunity to shift. And so that brought us into telling stories in space, not just in a 16:9 screen. And so we began that journey. So with them, we did a whole 2-year project, resulted in huge 21-foot screens, and we began to do things with game engines like Unity and Unreal. We actually had to figure out what UI, UX was in space and how you do interface design. So a bunch of cool, and then that brought in a whole level of technology and hardware. And so we had to have expertise. So we began to shift, and we still are in that space. Now we're doing projects for a lot of big companies, Accenture, Lenovo. We've got a lot of NDA level things going on where we're working on executive briefing centers. And so that has grown in spades for us. We're working on museums. We're working in a lot of different areas. I mean, one of the best stories I think I can tell on that journey is the Escape Game company here in Nashville. Phenomenal chain, and people don't realize that, but they're all over the country now. I think they got 50 or more locations. And so years ago, they came back to us and said, hey, we're evolving what we're doing. And we want to start integrating digital content, not just the standard analog room that you go in and solve some puzzles, but we want to really do digital interactive storytelling. Well, that began a multi-year partnership with them, where now by the time we were kind of done with that run, we were doing some incredible projects with Unreal and interactive lighting and physical controls. And there was a game where literally we built an entire video game inside their game, where you have an asteroids battle and you're loading physical torpedoes and firing them. And it's just, but that for us was that journey from, hey, just making a video into now we're doing interactive, immersive experiences. So that's kind of where we are now. We're still making, I call it linear content, but now we have a massive team that does full stack software development, all kinds of, AI is a big thing that we can probably shift into, but AI, generative content, all of that. So
yeah, that's unreal. I guess as you look back, well, I mean, going back to the escape game, before I even ask you this, it's like, we went there and, and I've seen all your work and I had no idea that it was your work. But I mean, where you bring it to life, that asteroid game, it's like, oh man, this is crazy. I actually thought that they probably got it done out of California or something,
Oh, wow.
That's great that you were a part of that. I guess you look back over the years, like, has there been one immersive experience that you go, man, that kind of shaped the direction we went with Fivestone?
There's probably a couple. I think one that probably put us on the map in a pretty big way. We had a relationship through another agency with Kia, the automotive company, and but the highlight moment in that journey was we were asked to do a Times Square takeover for Kia, and that was like the ultimate, because while it wasn't necessarily interactive, it was massive. You know what I mean? And it was right at a critical time. We were coming out of COVID. Times Square was coming back to life. They wanted to do a North American launch of a new electrical vehicle. And so we were brought in. We had a very short time period, but we basically created a story and a concept with this agency where there's a whole film that we developed about the birth of this vehicle, how lightning strikes and it drives across America. But as it's driving into New York, it was timed with a curtain opens up in Times Square and the two cars roll out. And then this power surge takes over all of Times Square. And this whole story then happens and unfolds. It was over 100,000 pixels, I think 44 screens, 6 blocks. And what's cool about that was we literally had to have this piece of software called Disguise so that we could fly through downtown New York or downtown Manhattan in Times Square to get weekly approvals with the executive team from Kia. So we had to go by every one of the 44 screens, but fly in real time. Fly through and show them this screen, check, sign off, check, sign off. And that was our process. And so we had a real-time 3D model of Times Square. And then that allowed us, and we flew up, I think, 3 times to do very expensive tests where we would take over all Times Square to test that content. So that was a big marker for us, because we were developing our own media platform at the time, so that we jokingly said we had animators from Brazil to Brooklyn that worked on the project, and that would have never been possible if we were on premise trying to do all of that. And so we had all our animators in the cloud working together, synced, and so it was a huge moment that definitely got us a lot of attention. And then it began to show people, hey, Fivestone isn't just doing little piddly projects. We can take on the big ones also.
Yeah.
So.
Over the years, Traylor, like we've taken on projects, and it's, the client asks you, hey, can you do this for us? And of course, as an entrepreneur, you go, yeah, I can do that. And then you walk out of the meeting and you go, how are we going to do that? I mean, I guess, hearing that, it's like, has there ever been a project you go, God, how are we going to do that? And you have to go figure it out?
Every one of them. And in fact, I think that's why you and I do this, is honestly, we're kind of adrenaline junkies, to be honest. I get excited about that. And it's like the line between sheer terror and excitement. And I think you have to have that, or else you shouldn't be in the business. You know what I mean? Because it's not a safe business.
Yeah.
And you have to be good. It's like being a race car driver. You have to be able to make decisions quickly, and then hopefully make good ones. You know what I mean? And so so we are almost every week. I wish we were doing really predictable work, but I probably wouldn't have the kind of creative team that we have, because the creative
Yeah.
team thrives on variety. And so we're constantly, I call it, lightning in a bottle. We're always being asked to do that. Underneath the hood, though, we are building predictability. We're building systems and templates and certain things that we can repeat. But on the front end, to what clients see, a lot of it's brand new. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of discovery and somewhat risk. So.
Yeah, before the show, we talked a little bit about your old events that you put on that were like Fivestone after five. And, Traylor, over the years, I've came to a few of them, and it seemed like every time I came over, you had something new to show me, from a new project you were working on, and, just seeing the passion behind, well, the creativity that you guys were doing, but also like the passion you had behind the work that you were doing always inspired me to keep like going in our business. And so you just need to know that. But I guess, going along those lines and knowing as an entrepreneur, there's highs and lows. Was there ever a time at like Fivestone that you thought, man, I don't know that we're going to make it?
Yeah, it's been, and that's the good, honest, and authentic story I like to tell, because people look at us and think, wow, they do cool work. I mean, that's our job, is to make people think we're amazing. But the truth underneath it is we've had multiple periods where we weren't sure we were going to make it. And it's required, because of pivots in the industry or a big shift where, like the classic for most companies, most creative studios, is you have too much reliance on one client goes away. All of a sudden, agencies go through all of that, where you're like, oh my God, a huge part of the meal ticket just, pivoted or shifted. And so we've been through a lot of those. What's been amazing, I have one story I think, I don't know the exact year that it happened, but I remembered Brian, who's one of my partners, and I both sat around with the team. And, Brian actually cried. And we said, guys, this is going to be tough. But what was so amazing, and we said, we aren't sure we're going to make it. But what was so cool was the team said, what can we do? We're all on board. And it was just a rallying moment that triggered 4 years of profitability and growth that we had never had before. So we're big believers. It starts honestly in my marriage with my wife. Is the hard times are where the lemonade is made. You know what I mean? You have to have lemons to make lemonade. And so I've learned that in my most basic family relationships, and then at Fivestone, it's been the same thing. Is like, what it really is the telling thing is, can we all get together, be honest, and then as a team gather around it? So we've had that. COVID was a huge one. The 2008 crisis, whatever, that financial crisis was a massive one. We had one around 2014 when Dell was a big client of ours. They got acquired, or they did the merger with EMC. And what we thought was we were gaining all these new clients. Actually, all our original clients got let go. You know what I mean? And so that was a huge, painful season. But you know what? You just pivot and then rally and then the team, if they're the right team, they rally with you. And then so that's kind of been the model. So
Yeah, the amount of agencies that I've talked to this year that, and I don't know what it is about this year other than maybe tariffs, maybe like political stuff, whatever it is. There's a lot of things out in the environment that cause this, but that have had that 50% of their revenue is dependent on one client, and they've lost that client. It's just the amount of agencies I've talked to this year. It's been extraordinary. And I just always come back to like, why do you put yourself in that position? And it's, you're looking for like, man, this is predictable. I can, until it's not. And
Yeah.
so that's a great lesson to like diversify in that. But,
and it's like the best and worst thing ever is when you get this amazing client that's the dream client, and they start taking over your company. And it's amazing because all of a sudden you're like, we're building all this inside baseball, and we can just work with them, and there's this amazing partnership. But what you watch is that all of a sudden they're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% of your business. And so, we've been in that situation many times where you have to hit the gas pedal so hard on diversifying because you can't fire that client, but then it forces you to grow the rest of the company so that you can balance that out.
Yeah. So. Well, you mentioned like, hey, now when you started there were 3 anime shops, and now there's thousands. And I guess it's easier than ever today to start an agency. I guess where do you typically see it go wrong with an anime shop or an agency?
Well, yeah, and I think too with all the layoffs, all the things that are, there's so much churn going on. There's a lot of incredible talent that now has the freedom. What are they going to do? If they can't get a job, guess what they're going to do? They're going to join up, and there's going to be a smaller version of probably that bigger thing that was there. So there's a lot of startups springing up of really talented small groups. So I think the biggest challenge that everyone will go through, though, is knowing what you can handle. I think, it's in the growth and it's in the transition arc is where we fail. There's what companies don't realize is that there's all these graveyards hidden in growth. And because you're caught in a transition point where it's the typical thing, talented artists wants to, it's the E-Myth story. You get tired of baking the cookies, so you want to make the bakery. And then what you've quickly realized is that you were really great at baking cookies, but you're not good at running the bakery. And so I think artists can run into that, or agency people or whatever. There's the business aspect, there's scaling, and there's a lot of painful. I still haven't figured it out. We're still navigating how to grow and scale effectively. And so I think that's the hard thing is it's easy to be small. What's smarter is just stay small and say no and some of the most successful people I know work really hard. They make a ton of money, but they don't scale. But they also say no. And they kind of stay in that sweet little lane. And so I think that's hard to know. Do you want to grow? If you grow, all those. That's a whole other conversation. We could
totally. We could talk all day. I love this conversation, and I, appreciate all your insights. I guess, and you take on these massive like projects, and you have to scale up and down. I guess, with that, like, how do you approach like collaboration in this creative space with other agencies agencies are pulling you in, you got to collaborate. You're pulling people in, you got to collaborate with. How do you approach all that?
Yeah, it is. I think in our space, the most biggest problem is bandwidth, and it's resourcing, it's people. Because what we do is very people centric, and so we're struggling in that now. Is we've got big projects. We're trying to scale up. It's building up a roster of trusted contractors, and it's also knowing as a studio for us, it's what percentage need to be Fivestone staff versus contractors, and making sure you got the right mix. Because we don't ever want there to be a job where there's just a producer and a bunch of contractors. You know what I mean? That there has to be leadership, a creative lead, a technical lead, and a project management lead. And so I think for us, it's a huge part is recruiting. A huge part for us is making opportunities to fail safely. And so we're always in a process where we're vetting and we're bringing in, we met this new hot programmer, this new hot artist, give them a small project, and but then almost plan on them to fail so that you can find out. Because I can't say enough how often people have amazing portfolios, or they look like they've done the coolest stuff in the world and they just cannot deliver, or they are, I guess, amazing, but they don't fit into our culture. And they don't communicate well. They're not, I call it head on a swivel. That's a football term. You know what I mean? Where they need to be looking around, in a virtual environment where we are, you're on Slack and on Zoom. And if you aren't showing up in Slack and on Zoom, then, you're not going to be successful with us. So anyways, we're doing a lot of recruiting, and then a lot of trying to test as much as possible, do small contracts, small projects, anything to kind of test and validate. And then on the other side is there are partnerships that we have in the world of immersive experiences, my gosh, there's whole companies we have to work with. And so we're in a constant, that's half of what I do is work on all these partnerships and getting feedback and working with technical teams here or different people here. And so we're constantly vetting, constantly meeting new people, and then trying to work through those partnerships because we can't do it all ourselves. I don't know if I answered that
Yeah,
well.
no, I think that's great. Well, I mean, just speaking of culture, and I love how you defined how you built your culture. I guess now that you've built it, now that you're scaling up and your virtual team now instead of in office, how are you protecting the culture that you built as you add more team members, all virtually, all over?
Yeah, well, I wish I could say we're crushing it, but that wouldn't be truthful. I think, the big challenge, the upside of being remote and virtual is we've been able to hire amazing talent. And part of it, Mark, we in our growing, we're going international because our work is now international.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of our biggest hires this year is Jesus Galvez out of Barcelona. He's our managing director now because we have work. There's nothing worse than a project happening in Japan and you're trying to stay up all night in America to service that project. And so we're now in that place where we have, talent in Canada, we have talent in Europe, and we're building that team. And so some of the things that I will say that we've gone through, this is like a painful lesson, is when we were a smaller studio, this whole culture thing that I've told you about has been a founder-driven thing. It's my heartbeat. And Brian, my partner, David, my partner, we're all aligned on this culture of honor. But what happens when you grow is if you don't have process that actually has that culture infused into it, what happened honestly this past year, one of the most brutal things is we began to grow so fast that our process wasn't scalable. And so as we would onboard people, they just got thrown in because we didn't have a good onboarding process. And then guess what? Doesn't matter how great of a person I am. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter that, that producer we brought on loves talking to Traylor. But guess what? If Traylor doesn't have time to download everything out of his brain and tell him how to do what he's supposed to do. So what we quickly realized is that culture has to bleed in and affect and drive the process. And so, or else, we lost some key people because our process didn't scale. And so now that's what Jesus and our team is doing is we're building out a process that reflects our culture. And so that a part of our growing has been to make sure that our process, how we run the studio meets up to all the cultural standards. And so the other pieces, I travel a lot. We're now starting to have teams. We have teams in Atlanta. We have a team in Chicago. We have a growing team in New York. So there's a lot of regional meetings that we're doing. And then there's at least we're hoping twice a year we're flying folks in, and it's for a week. And so we do a lot of planning together, a lot of working together. There's a lot of rhythms that we do to try and do it virtually, but there's nothing that replaces like breaking bread together. And so there's times where we'll put key people together like, hey, we've got the executive creative director and the head of technology. You guys need to spend some time together. So we'll fly them in to meet. And maybe it's not the whole team, but we're always strategically trying to make sure that's like breathing. If we're not breathing, we're all holding our breath trying to work. So we're trying to navigate that. It's been great growing because of the remote culture. It's allowed us to hire amazingly talented people. But then the increased pressure is then how do we get together? Because I still believe in the water cooler conversation. We haven't quite figured all that out yet. So
yeah, like in our business, it's easy to measure like what we do. Like it's you spend $1 and how much did we generate for the client based on the digital work that we're doing. I guess with you all and doing like animation and these immersive experiences that are absolutely like beautiful, how do you measure success on that stuff? Or how do your clients go, hey, Traylor, check the box, this was a win, or hey, man, this didn't hit the mark?
Yeah. Oh boy, that's been one of our biggest challenges is, a lot of the work is it's speculative or it's subjective. I'll say there's projects that we're now involved in where let's say it's an executive briefing center in a corporate headquarters. It's much more measurable because now they're bringing in, they can measure, and they have software that measures, and our interactives can also gather data, like how many touches and all that stuff. But now they can actually measure, well, how many people are coming through the executive briefing center, how many people actually engage with this cool immersive experience. So we can do those things whenever we can add, tracking or measurement, we do. But, like Times Square, when we did that, who knows? You know what I mean? I know they live streamed it, so maybe there's some measurement, but I think because we're not always the agency, the larger agency, we don't have control or knowledge. We're more just delivering a piece. And so we're delivering the content or delivering this experience. So that's a really good question. I would love to have more control on that. Like when we work with the museum, we're always pushing to trying to add measurement so that they know, well, how many people are actually passing through and engaging with this certain experience. So we definitely can do that, and we provide that information to them. How they're using it, I don't know. So it's a great question.
Well, you touched on a little bit the 1 and 1 equals 3 earlier on in the show, and I guess how is that so core to like what you're doing today? Like, break that down a little bit more.
I mean, I just got to watch it early on is when I realized what was better than me actually doing great work was when I got to work with someone else. It's like making a baby, but a creative baby together. Like two people get together and they work and this thing happens. We're like, oh my God, that's incredible. This thing was so awesome what we made. That to me is that bad math. And then as we began as a company to foster that, where people could get together, and also this project exceeded everyone's expectations because if it was just, the Michael Jordan of the team, doing it, it's going to be only as good as Michael Jordan. But when the whole Chicago Bulls got together, something really great happened. And so that's what we're trying to do. Is there's a feeling, I don't know how to tell you, Mark, but when we all sit around and just get so excited because this outcome is there's like happy surprises because you're like, or happy accidents, like, oh my God, this thing came out of this, that we weren't planning on that, and that now it's gotten better. A lot of times, the way we know is because the client's like, this was the best experience we ever had. You know what I mean? That is a lot of our feedback, is because clients come back to us and they're like, we want more of that. There may be studios that do maybe even better work than us, but the way we get to the work is just as important as the work itself. It's how you get to the work, how you serve the client. And so that's a lot of I call the 1 + 1 equals 3. And then how we partner with that client, that when they feel like when we get with them and this new thing happens because we served them and we got together, and they didn't just sit on their laurels. The best clients are the ones that roll up their sleeves and jump in. And then that's what I call 3 + 3 = 9, because now Fivestone has gotten together with client, and now we're making an awesome creative baby together. So that's the real win. So that's my bad math. I'm always looking for that. There's a way you can sit in a room or sit in a call and see if that's happening or not. And so I'm on the lookout. That's my hunt. So,
yeah. Well, you've always been on the front end of like emerging technologies. I just through all of our conversations in the past, and I guess you mentioned AI, but are there other emerging technologies that like you're keeping a close eye on? And then how are you incorporating even AI and these emerging technologies into what you're doing today?
Yeah. So it's funny, we have multiple projects, and it all has to do with the clients that we work with. So certain clients, we have to sign a contract that there will be no AI at all a part of any of it, because everyone has a different stance. We have another client, Lenovo, that is like AI, because they're literally partnered with NVIDIA and they're supplying the processors to make AI. So we're doing front-facing, really cool generative AI projects in their executive briefing centers. We have a traveling exhibit that literally is a generative AI exhibit. And so this isn't just, on ChatGPT and, making something happen, but it's actually development and programming software. This is where I jokingly say I drown in 6 inches of technology. So I can say enough to say that AI is very much in our lens. It's not something we wish to do. We are doing. We have a whole team that is working on that. And so I think what's really important, though, is there are a huge number of questions that we're all trying to navigate, because it's a huge driver right now. The first thing that brings up is clients say, well, let's just make it an AI, you know what I mean? And so why can't we do this? Meaning, i.e., do it for $5. Let's get someone in some sweatpants with the pizza and go make our next Super Bowl commercial. And so I think we're in that same tension right now. And so where we've found our success is we are very much exploring AI as a part of our content pipeline. But it's a tool. It's not the end. It's not the, hey, make me a cool video because I don't know what to do. It is simply a tool that we're finding really powerful ways to leverage. In some cases, it will be the front end. In some of our interactive experiences, we're actually leveraging AI. And so that's kind of the best where I'm at. So in terms of the trend, that is the biggest 800-pound gorilla in the room that we're trying to figure out and navigate with a whole bunch of other people. And I'd say if companies are not trying to figure that one out, it's a scary place, because I don't think you're going to be around that long. If we don't figure out how to navigate that and work with it as a tool. And
yeah, you're right, God. And then the amount of agencies I've talked to that they're still a little bit like adverse to it. Like they don't even want to get into it. It's pretty shocking. Like,
Well, and to be fair, I mean, we're in the middle of a big transition, and people are worried about their jobs. People are worried about what they do, and the best advice I can say is just become really good at leveraging it. It doesn't replace your brain. It doesn't replace you as an artist. It doesn't, but it's a tool that can scale what you do. And then even if you're not, just prompting an art result, there's so many ways you can leverage AI to accelerate your own craft that does not replace your craft. It just accelerates your craft. And so I think, we're in that important place right now where you don't want to be the guy that's holding the poop catcher behind the horse when the car comes out. You know what I mean? And so the car is here, and so you really want to be making sure you're in that zone. So yeah, for sure.
Well, as we start to wrap up the show, I got a couple last questions for you. But what advice would you give to your younger creative self?
Listen to my dad.
Go learn from somebody else.
Yeah, man. I'd say if you're really passionate about starting a business or just doing it, like being the baker versus starting a bakery versus being the baker, is really make sure that you get a good mentor. Really make sure that you spend a couple years working under someone to learn the craft and to learn the business. What's funny is my dad gave me that advice when I was 21 and I didn't listen. He said, go take 5 years. Guess what? What was that? Oh my God. It was probably 20 years later. I ended up at CMT. You know how long I was at Country Music Television? Almost 4+ years, almost 5 years. That was the advice that unfortunately I had to go get a painful learning curve before that opportunity came back. And I still to this day tell my dad, thank you, because that was where I got mentored. That's where I learned on their dime. And then I was able to springboard out of that and be successful. So that would be myself as a Traylor. If there's any way, buddy, be humble. But and part of it, I have one more saying, sometimes I don't just have to touch the stove. I've got to lick the stove, and I got to pull down my pants and then sit on the stove. And that was kind of me. I was that hard-headed, very driven person that I kind of needed to really get humbled. And then eventually my dad's advice came back. And so,
Man, it is.
That's my tip.
Yeah, you're definitely a driven entrepreneur for perfection and all the stuff you're building and culture and all that. But how do you unwind? What do you have anything you do that helps you unwind and get away from the screens and the pixels?
Yeah. It's funny. I actually call it my anti-pixel therapy. But I spend a huge amount of time in nature. I do a lot. Prior to this podcast we're doing today. I went and ran 5 miles in Percy Wonder Park, and so I do a lot of trail hiking. But not only that, I include my family in that. It's not just a me thing. It's not me off doing my thing, but I take my son on hikes. My wife and I, we travel with my son. We homeschool him, but a lot of that is so that we can get disconnected. Because I do think, it's weird. We're in this tension of, I do think there's a big concern around screens, and here I am making Times Square, that kind of thing. And so there's that constant thing. So I personally, for myself, balance it by spending a lot of time disconnected from screens, in nature, exercising. It's a huge therapy thing for me. It's cathartic. So that helps me kind of balance it out.
It's a great lesson for other entrepreneurs, man.
Yeah.
Find your journey out there.
That's right. That's right.
Well, as we wrap up, is there anything that I didn't ask you, or maybe that you'd like to share that would help the audience?
I don't think so. I think my biggest thing is I'm excited about this podcast. I'm excited about the community that's happening in Nashville. I want to be more part of that. There's been seasons where we had to grow past Nashville because the things we were wanting to do just weren't supported here. But now it's exciting. There are really cool things happening here, and I want to invest in Nashville. I want to be a part of that. And so I'm really excited to see what can happen here in Nashville, and not just around the world, even though that's important too. That's exciting. But Nashville is the home where we have begun. And so I want to keep seeing the creative community and the technical community. It's now not just creative, but it's technology, both of those, but how they marry together. I'd love to see that thrive more in Nashville.
Traylor, there's a lot of creative shops in town, but I always go back to, man, there is one super creative shop, and it always comes back to you guys and everything you've been doing over the years. And I know you say, hey, Mark, love what you built, and but I would just take you back to our very beginning. And I remember we started off in business with a video resume service, and it was kind of a failure on start, but we were already out. We had to figure out what to do next. And I remember we started to evolve in doing videos, and we didn't have it all figured out, even though we were doing okay. But I remember reaching out to you, and I said, hey, Traylor, here's what we're doing. I would love to send a person from my team over to just shadow you for a day and learn from you, just as you're so creative. And you said, yeah, man, I'm happy to. I don't even know if you remember that, but that just, it's always stuck with me. And,
cool.
And I mean, throughout the years, being able to come and see your passion kept us going, kept me excited about the industry, the business. So, it's just, I appreciate everything you're doing for the Nashville community and your team. You've got, super talented team. And so just keep lifting everybody up. But just know you've impacted a lot of people that didn't even work for you.
Amazing. Well, man, I'm honored. That's my hope. Probably if I have a life after Fivestone, I just want to encourage people. I love sitting down with people and saying, how can I breathe life on them? And so I love that. I want us to continue that friendship.
Well, you're going to be an author, big time speaker, even bigger than you are today. And I know you speak all over the world. So keep up the great work. Traylor, thank you so much for joining the show today. That's a wrap on this episode with Traylor Woodall. A huge thank you for inviting us into your world of storytelling that spans pixels, immersive environments, and live action. If today's conversation sparked your curiosity, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and come back for more creative journeys from the most talented Nashville creative leaders. Until next time, stay bold, stay inspired, and keep that spark alive.
And that's a wrap on this episode of The Spark from Creative Assembly. Thanks for spending time with us and exploring the minds shaping Nashville's creative future. If you're walking away more inspired, connected, or energized, that's exactly the point. A big thank you to our sponsor, Snapshot, and the incredible team behind the scenes who make this show possible. Your support fuels every conversation and keeps collaboration alive. So if you haven't already, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, Stay creative, stay curious, and keep that spark.